Ani Bojo Kinawea, Mandy and Dishnakas, Shabata Bajuan Donjaba, Makwa Dodem. Hello everybody, my name is Mandy. I am Bear Clan from Charlotte Lake, and I am currently the Community Connections Coordinator at the Kingston Indigenous Languages Nest, which I like to say is just a big fancy tongue twister to signify that I get to do amazing on the land programs and bring food sovereignty programs to the Kingston area in the form of foraging walks, garden programs, and food literacy courses. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the gifts of our dear friend Cattail in Anishinaabe-Moan known as Epekweshkwe. If you ever wanted to harvest cattail or you ever wanted to look for cattail, the first thing you need to do is you need to know how to identify a cattail. And a lot of people know how to identify the cattail. The easiest way to tell is when it shoots up that brown fuzzy seed head that kind of looks like a marsh hot dog. Then you know that you're in a patch of cattails. However, cattails do have a poisonous somewhat look-alike, and those are purple iris flowers. Obviously, purple iris flowers have a flower instead of a shoot or instead of a stalk and that fuzzy brown flower head. But when irises are super small, just like when cattails are super small, you can easily confuse the two of them. So there's kind of a couple rules that I like to use in order to determine whether or not it's a cattail. One of the things you can use to determine whether or not it's a cattail is the way that the leaves attach to the base of the stalk or the stem. So when it comes to cattails, if this was the stalk, the leaves always wrap around the outside of the stalk, and you can peel each one of those leaves off, kind of like a layer. Now when it comes to purple irises usually grow in a bulb, and then they will fan out their leaves like this, and they aren't usually attached around the base. So if you try to break off a purple iris leaf, it'll just snap right off, and it'll usually take a piece of that bulb or a piece of that root with it. So that's a good way to tell. The leaves as well as the flower heads that develop. When they're super, super small, you want to be very, very careful because the purple irises are toxic and they are a tummy no-no. So you want to be very careful and be sure that you know what you're looking for when you're identifying cattails. And if you're ever not sure, it's always good to bring someone who knows what they're doing, who is experienced in harvesting cattails, or an elder or knowledge keeper within your area who knows about the plants that live around you. So once we've determined that we know it's a cattail and it's safe to harvest, then we can talk about all the different gifts, or then we can learn about all the different gifts that the cattail provides. So right here I have a little mini diagram of all the different stages, or most of the different stages of the cattail. Now the word for cattail in Anishinaabe-Moan is Epekweshkwe, which loosely translates to weavable, makeable, buildable leaf. When you weave cattails, they can be used for textiles, they can be used for mats, they can be used for roofs, they can be used, I've made bookmarks out of them, baskets, all kinds of things. The cattails' ability and gifts are only limited by your own imagination. So at the beginning of spring, when cattails first start to emerge, you're not going to see any of the stuff that's under the water, because usually they shoot their roots down and create a dense mat of rhizomes that covers the water, and you can't usually see into it because other vegetation will grow on top of those roots as well, just at the very top of the water. So at the beginning of the spring, cattails are going to look like this, and they're going to have a few little shoots that come up, and at this stage you can harvest the whole cattail and eat just the shoot. Or what I like to do to guarantee that the cattail is still going to survive, because this is just a young baby cattail, is if you go to the very center of the cattail leaves, there should be one or two in the center that you can just pull right out like this. And if you look at the bottom of these leaves, they'll go from a greenish, kind of like a greenish blue color, all the way down to a white. The areas that are white, you can just stick in your mouth and you can eat just like a cucumber, and it tastes a little bit like a cucumber. And one of the things that I used to do when I was a kid is carry a little bit of salt and pepper around in a Ziploc baggie and then throw it on there and just have a little trail snack. So this is one of the first edible parts of a cattail, is the shoots, early in spring. Now later on within the season, the cattails are going to form these leaves, and then they're also going to shoot up this little stalk here, which a lot of people don't know actually have two flowers instead of one flower. So the flower at the top is considered the male flower because it creates pollen, and then this one is considered the female flower because it gets pollinated and then creates those little seed heads. So at this point, when the male flower is yellow, it's starting to create its pollen, and this happens around mid-spring, early summer. This pollen can be collected into jars or bags. What I like to do is just bend the cattail head over and shake it into my container. And this is a really good source of protein. It's also can be used as an alternative to flour. So I've made pancakes, muffins, and crackers out of it before. Now, just before this flower gets pollinated, it's bright green and a little wet. This is the female flower. And you can cut the male flower off and cut at the stalk here and harvest this little green cattail flower and fry it up on the barbecue or cook it over a fire, and it tastes like a marsh corn on the cob. This is also edible. So down in the stalks and the shoots here, a lot of people will use those for like dowels or sticks. You can use them to make trellises for your garden. They're a very strong stick, so they can bear a little bit of weight. So I've used them for pole beans and things like that in the garden. And then these leaves, you can collect the leaves, peel them off on the sides, and then dry them out, and they can be used for weaving. So you can weave baskets, you can weave mats. I've done bookmarks, and anything you can weave with cattail, basically. Further down here, you'll see that we've got the rhizome, and then in early spring, summer, all of the information or sugars and starches and fiber in the rhizomes get shot up into here in order to produce those flowers. But once the flower is pollinated, what will happen is the male seed head will fall off. This will turn brown, and then the female flower will form. And at this stage, which is usually midsummer to late summer, at this stage, before it starts to get all fluffy, you can harvest these and dry them out, and they will stay like that, and they're a really, really good fire starter. I know that if you take the top of it and you soak it in deer tallow, or what is considered, it's like just rendered fat of an animal, or any sort of flammable oil, if you soak it in that and do it, light it on fire from start to finish with deer tallow specifically, it will last up to a 6-hour torch, and anywhere from 3 to 6 hours for any of the other materials as well. Later on in the season, or if we peel back all of these leaves, one of the things we'll find in the center of the cattail is the cattail stalk. And a lot of people like to peel back all of the leaves until this part is exposed. It'll be a lighter green to a kind of yellow color. And this is filled with starch. And if I get a big enough one, what I like to do is I like to cut it and then fry them up. And it's similar to potato chips, but it's cattail potato chips. In between these leaves, when you peel each one of these leaves off of the initial stalk, there's a type of jelly that lives in between the cattails, and this jelly is an amazing medicine. It can numb pain, soothe sore cuts, scrapes, burns, and bruises. The cattail jelly that lives inside here can be used as both a sunscreen and an afterburn. So you can put it on before you go to the beach, and you can put it on right after as soon as you get home if you have a sunburn. Cattail jelly has been known as one of those medicines that people have used since time immemorial, and even newcomers to Turtle Island have known about the properties and benefits and have used it commercially as well. So later on in the season, once the leaves have all died back, the seed head has gone to seed, usually it's fluffy at this point, and you get that first kind of crisp layer of ice over the water, it's a really good time to get out there and look for the cattail rhizomes. So these rhizomes, or roots, will shoot out, and sometimes you'll see that it might have one, but at the same time they might grow a rhizome one way and another rhizome another way. Because what these rhizomes can also do is they're not just roots, but they can actually shoot up and become new cattails. So they have a lot of information and a lot of healthy things in there to create whole new cattails. So during this time of year, just after the first kind of frost goes over the water, what the cattail will do is it will take all that energy from the biggest part of its plant and it'll bring it all down into its roots. And this is the best time to get the tubers because they're full of starch, they're full of sugar, and they're full of lots of vitamins that help us throughout the winter. So you can dig down, and I always recommend if you are going to go out there and look for the rhizomes, you're going to want to have rubber boots because you got to get in the muck because that's where the rhizomes live. You can pull these up from the bottom, clean off some of they'll have like little shooting roots off of the edges, clean that off, and then you can boil it up like a potato or any other tuber or root vegetable. I personally like to turn them into potato chips or what I call cattail crisps, where I'll grind them up with a cheese grater and then fry them a little bit, and they taste absolutely delicious. Now, one of the things you should know about cattails, or you should keep in mind when it comes to cattails, is that cattails are bioaccumulators. And bioaccumulators is just a really big word to say that cattails clean the water by pulling toxins from the water into themselves, and then they can transform that toxin into something that nature can then receive again. The problem with that is that cattails do this at a very, very, very slow rate. So sometimes those toxins can accumulate inside the parts of the cattail that we want to collect or that we want to eat. So it's very important that if you're ever looking for cattails for eating, that you're making sure they're coming from a source of water that is not contaminated, that's not near any sort of that's not near any industrial areas, and that are at least 100 feet away from roadways. Yeah, these are all the gifts of Apequeshque, or the cattail. So I highly encourage you guys to get out there, to know your plant relations, to try to find out what gifts they provide, and see what other gifts cattails have to offer, because nature takes care of us. All we have to do is take care of nature.